Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We're super inspired and excited to have our first live webinar together. This is the Leadership Mindset Masterclass. And the topic for today's live webinar is based on this idea of building your leadership advisory board. And one of the things I'm really inspired about is having the opportunity to have gotten connected with Tiki Varnado, incredible human being, inspiring woman, and really is a leader in her community and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and wisdom. And so today, she and I are going to share both from our experience as well as our client experience when we think about these master classes coming down in the months to come, but also in today's conversation around building your leadership advisory board. For those of you that will be joining live and listening also on the replay, there are going to be ways for you to connect with us after this session, which will provide that information to you towards the end of our time. And for those of you that are here live, there is a chat room. During the course of while I'm screen sharing, I'll be able to see some of it, but we may not respond right away until we get into the Q&A. We'll have moments within the mindset class or the master class where we'll stop for a minute and give you an opportunity to ask us questions. And you can either type those in the chat or you can raise your hand if you would like to verbally share with us either your thoughts or your questions through this. So first, I'd love to introduce Tiki Varnado and have you share with us a little bit about you, Tiki, and then I'll share a little bit about me afterwards, and then we'll get rolling.
Absolutely. So thank you, Allison. I am super excited about the topic today. When I think about my 20 years in human resources and most important, my rise to leadership, I think about all of the opportunities, the influencers, the advisors, just all of the resources that were collectively around me to help advance my professional aspirations. And today I'm excited to talk about just really this leadership mindset, and particularly around how to build an advisory board in order to help you grow. So a little bit about myself. I spent 20 years in the human resources industry, and I've worked in many industry verticals as an HR practitioner, whether it be healthcare. I worked for a little organization called MD Anderson Cancer Center, the #1 cancer center in the world, located in Houston. I've had a chance to work for oil and gas organization, ExxonMobil, retail, Target Corporation, and at the rise of my career, I've had the opportunity to work for one of the most amazing HR consulting firms that I'm aware of, which is Aon Hewitt. And in these roles, I have helped business leaders, CEOs, people managers, colleagues really begin to understand this notion around human resources, the culture, engagement, leadership, growing your career, and really what's the systematic approach, the art and the science of being able to be successful. And I am very proud that after 20 years of experience, I now have the opportunity to work with women leaders and small organizations and individuals in the government to bring some of these insights and industry best practices to those that are looking forward. So 20 years of HR experience, I've had the hard knocks, the ups and downs, the ins and outs, but I will tell you conclusively, over the span of my career, I will tell you having a leadership advisory board, both internal in your organization as well as external, is going to be critical for your success and your mobility. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, Allison, thank you for being my co-host, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tiki. So, my name is Allison Nail-Malone, and my organization is Malone Consultants Group. And the inspiration for this idea of running my own business came from moments in which I worked within large organizations and small organizations like Tiki over the last 20 years. And what I found to be really crucial and really powerful are those moments when a manager was sitting in front of me, an employee might have been sitting in front of me, or some senior leader was sitting in front of me with questions and doubts and wanting the ability to brainstorm with someone to not only develop in their career, but also to support the people that report directly to them, that they reported directly to, and that they impact from the peer level side to side. And knowing that this impact was greater than just the people in their circle, but that it impacted each individual's families and communities. And that inspired me to move into a practice where not only to do human resources consulting and recruiting consulting, but also from the side of career and leadership development. So today, these organizations are primarily nonprofits, small to mid-sized businesses that are growing very quickly, who know that they need both assistance from the HR side, but also additional resources and support when it comes to the leadership development piece of that. And then also organizations that are at a larger and global scale wanting to develop their up and coming leaders, as well as both Tiki and I serve people on a one-on-one basis as well. And so again, just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to partner with Tiki. And one of the things I wanted to touch on are the types of services that Tiki's organization, HR and Co., and Malone Consultants Group, what we collectively do together. Each of us have our own specialties. We also have areas that we're very, very strong in together. And so one of the things that we're doing is combining, depending on the client and the resources and who we desire to serve together, these are the kinds of services that we provide, so that end-to-end human resources consulting and advisory. When you think about our experience collectively over 40 years collective experience, that is pretty amazing. We also provide executive and career coaching, leadership and manager development programs from the very beginning to the end game. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those resources available to you. Business acumen and skill building, as well as different types of leadership workshops in small groups to the corporate setting. And then also focusing on you as an individual, where we talk about having a VIP focus day.
Great. So let's just dive right in and let's get started. So let's talk a little bit about this masterclass, the leadership mindset and building your leadership advisory board. And so essentially the premise is that everyone needs a team of people who can provide support, thought leadership, and coaching along the way. And so when you're thinking about growing personally or professionally or in your community, one, having support is critical. You do want that thought leadership, that innovative, someone who's helping you think outside the box, and then really coaching you to be your best self. So we're going to try to cover today looking at building this board for identifying individuals with different backgrounds, various skills and capabilities, how to build trusted advisor or identify partner, and then really how do you leverage these resources when you're faced with day-to-day decisions and crossroads and challenges. And so we're going to talk about, some people call this a personal board of directors or leadership advisory board, but essentially it's in how do you build your ensemble, or the folks that will be sitting at your table that get to know you, that understand where you're trying to go, that can really support, provide some leadership, and actually coach you as you go along this journey. So that's really the premise of this class today, and so we'll dive into really building your board. So really three things to think about when we talk about building your board, and there's really three mindsets that you need to have. What and why do you want to build a board? And it's going to be critical when you think about the what and the why. What is a leadership advisory board, and what is that going to mean to you as you begin to develop your blueprint and your plan, and how do you execute against that? And why this board is more effective than mentoring. I'm a firm believer in mentoring. I've been a mentor and coach for many years, but specifically, what is different about an advisory board than having a mentoring relationship? Secondly, the mindset of who. Who needs to be a part of your group dynamics that's going to help you be successful? So we're going to talk about how to identify the what and the who, and most important, to make sure that you have the right board members to even out or to create some consistency around just some of the focus areas. And then finally, impact. Once you understand those three components, you want to make sure that you are developing a board for an impact perspective. So how do you develop your strategy? And then how do you effectively use that board? So just saying what and why and who is not really any good unless you actually put a plan in place and begin to execute against that. So that's what we're going to cover in this first section around the board. So Allison, why don't you walk us through the what and why, and then we'll keep moving.
Awesome. Thank you. So, first, for some, this may be the first time you've ever heard of this term, personal board of directors or leadership advisory board. I'm sure most of you have heard a business will have a board of directors. And that board of directors is a collective group of people that bring different mindsets, different experiences, different advice, and different questions. And essentially, it's the same for you. These are individuals who are invested in your advancement when you think about your career goals, your professional development, and even your personal development. One of the things that both Tiki and I believe is that this is a holistic approach. This isn't just about this one lane of your career development. Your personal board of directors are individuals who are leaders, they're influencers, and can be key stakeholders. And really, each one of them bring their own unique strengths and talents and ideas. This is a part for you where you have your own sounding board. This is a group of people where you will go to get advice from, that will provide you feedback on your life decisions. So again, we're talking about not just your career and professional development, but also as a person and human development. Whatever your opportunities and your challenges are, they're there to talk you through that. Now, these are the individuals that really give you the real advice. You'll have some that will be there to support you and say, yes, you can do it. And then you'll have a good balance of people who are going to be able to provide you like that critical critiques to help you stretch and grow. And most importantly, these are individuals that can be trusted, that will tell you your best truth. These are those heavy hitters where they're going to be at different levels, and we'll talk about the who here in just a moment. But this is really who, the what, and the reasons why you should have your personal board of directors. So a lot of people are kind of, why should I even have this? The why is much more effective than the mentoring. So as Tiki mentioned, mentoring is really important and critical in your development. But there's something very specific and unique about having a leadership development board. This group of people are really there to give you different perspectives and life experiences. So each of these individuals are going to bring their own lens that you can actually leverage and gain their knowledge to best support you. These are individuals that have been invested in your outcome that is totally in your best interest. They have your best interest in their heart. Typically, these individuals will have more knowledge and experience than you. They have a better understanding and skill set. So, as you're thinking about the individuals in your network right now, I'm sure that you could probably identify one or two people that have, where you've thought at one point, wow, if I just knew how to do that, or I wonder how they got that kind of experience. That's kind of the person that we're talking about. These individuals have a different viewpoint, which drives a different point of view and is really critical to your success as a thought leader, particularly as you're growing your career, whether that is on a leadership track where you're managing groups or teams of people, or you're an influencer in a different way. So as we move forward, we're going to talk a little bit more about this idea of the moment where you begin to start to identify and how you're going to identify and what you should be thinking about when it comes to building your leadership board of directors. So Tiki, I'd love to hear, from your perspective, what you have found to be really useful, both for you as a professional, but also for the clients that you've worked at when we're talking about identifying your need when it comes to building your board.
Absolutely. So let me start with a personal. So I'm gonna share some personal examples, and then I'll talk about it as a professional. So one, as I was developing in my career, and obviously with setting my sights on having a senior leadership role, the first thing I discovered is that I actually used performance and peer feedback to understand what were my strengths, weaknesses, and as far as my career, what was my opportunities and threats. And so as I consistently began to look at the themes that came up in performance or 360 feedback or project feedback, I identified that from an executive presence perspective, I'm very technical, I'm very direct, I'm very to the point, but also needing to understand my audience and how to engage different stakeholders. And this really became critical as I start working with CEOs and start working with senior vice presidents, and you kind of name it, as to becoming an influencer from an HR perspective and how to get them to see me, to listen to me, to respect my point of view and opinion, and begin to see me as the co-author of their people strategy or their HR initiatives. And one opportunity I had was really making a personal connection. So from a cultural standpoint, I've always been taught work is work and personal is personal. I bring part of myself to work, but not my full self. And we hear a lot about that in diversity and inclusion. And so what I did is that I identified 2 to 3 leaders that I trusted. And I trusted them because we had worked together, or I had coached them through a situation, and we had, gained this mutual partnership. I identified some that were personal, colleagues that I'd worked with in my career as peers. And then I also enlisted just some colleagues. If I think about the new and emerging leaders in the organization that were coming up, that I was actually influencing and impacting, to begin to be my, what I called accountability partners, and they really formed my board. And so when I determined that I needed to understand how to bring more of my personal self to the workplace, I went to this group and said, hey, I need your help. I'm growing in my career, I'm delivering and executing, I'm meeting all of the goals and the metrics, but there's this one thing I think that would really, catapult me to that next level. And I don't see it because I have this natural tendency to work one way. And so I share with them and says, I'm going to work on really creating an authentic personal self at work, but also within reason. And I know that that person needed to show up different depending on the meeting. So bottom line on top, I went to this group, I shared with them what I was trying to accomplish, and I said, ask them to give me honest, constructive, or positive feedback in the moment. So if we were in a meeting and they observed that I would do something, we had this little secret hand gesture that we would do. Or if I'd had the colleague that I tapped into before, they would give me some direct examples of maybe places in the past where we'd worked together, or just the everyday colleague when I was, delivering meetings or coaching someone, to provide some feedback where I could have come across more personal versus more direct. And so I use that board to actively work on that characteristic that I was building. And I strategically set meetings every week with them, little 30-minute touch bases, and say, hey, I have this meeting. Or I would orchestrate meetings where I could have these individuals available so that they could observe me in this natural state. So I personally, again, and I've duplicated that anytime that there was a specific competency, skill, capability, or knowledge that I needed to develop, to go to those advisors or look at a different set of advisors depending on what I needed, which we'll talk about later, to be able to give me the candid feedback, and it worked.
Mm.
So from a HR or a professional perspective, oftentimes I'm coaching in the corporate world. I coach CEOs and leaders, or now in business world, coaching leaders to understand this dynamic and really talking about their leadership legacy. And I always coach from the mindset to say, you are a visionary for the organization, and what's going to connect you to the everyday colleague, whether it be leader or not, that's trying to follow your vision. And one of the most important things that you can't do is erode trust. And so I've coached other leaders, and I've actually made connections to say, hey, you're really good at ops or finance, but you really suck at creating a compelling message. This leader is great. I think this person should be a part of your board. And what I'd like for you to do is, before you present, maybe test your message with them. Or maybe they can take some of the technical jargon out and add some of those words that will connect with people. So I say all of that to say that I've advised leaders and even business owners today, when I say look at a different business owner, look at their model, begin to create this ensemble so you have this positive conversation. And what's most important is that you understand what you're trying to work towards. It's one thing to have a laundry list, you have no direction, you're not really sure, but I think that this is a very strategic, it's a very intentional and direct partnership, and it creates the vulnerability because you're asking someone to be critical as well as supportive on areas that you want to develop. So, Allison, I'm not really sure if that provides an example, but I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll see who's on the phone that wants to ask the question.
Yeah, no, I think that was incredible. And thank you for sharing a
Yep.
really authentic personal story too. What I loved about your story is that, number one, it was very intentional, but it also came from the place of what can I do and what do I need in order for me to serve other people in a more authentic way, to show up more authentically, and what kind of impact that's going to have. And I think that's really key when we're considering building our personal board of directors. First, you identified your need. Where are you going in your career, and did you actually need a board? And as you went through that, you identified, yes, most definitely. You created a list of knowing where not just yours, but where your board's knowledge, skills, capabilities, and background is needed in order for you to grow and stretch in your career. And then you started that thought process where who could be on your board and why, which I'm excited to be able to kind of talk about what that looks like. So thank you for that. And I'm going to just check here to see if there's anyone that has any questions. So it's going to just, forgive me just a second to get to the chat room here. Okay, so Sapna or anyone else, do you have any questions at the moment? If so, you can raise your hand or just type in the question in the chat below. So Sapna says right now, no questions at this time. Awesome. Okay, so let me go ahead and get back to our presentation. Okay. So as Tiki mentioned, we're going to dive into the who, and we oftentimes this is the question that we ask. So Tiki, I'm going to hand this over to you to really kind of help us dive into who are the people that we need to start thinking about as we, one, develop a brand new board, or maybe we have one and it's kind of gotten stagnant. So who do we need to be thinking about as it
Yep.
comes to that?
Absolutely. So let me just test. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the first thing when we talk about who, the first thing I always tell people in any coaching arrangement is that you have to start with yourself. Oftentimes we seek out relationships or connections, or we try to network, or some people may try to build this board, and they don't have any perspective, or they haven't taken the time to be reflective of where they are today and ultimately where they're trying to go. So again, I suggest that you use multiple points of feedback, whether it's your own self-reflection, if you've received back from the community, from friends, or even in the workplace, whether it's performance evaluation or 360 feedback or project feedback, whatever it is, combine all of those things together and really begin to discern where you are, and ultimately it's going to help you think about where you're going to go. And so here are some questions. It's not an exhaustive list, but some things that you can consider as you're starting your journey. So number one, are you really ready for leadership? Oftentimes I've coached leaders and colleagues who think that they're ready for the responsibility of leadership, but in fact they don't understand what that level of accountability comes a different set of rules, and have they really worked to prepare themselves to do that. So I would pause and check to say, am I really ready to be a leader? And if so, what does that look like for me, and what does success look like? So name it and define what it means. Understand and be ready. Are you ready to create a board? Are you at a place where you can be open and transparent to say that I'm actually ready to surround myself with a diverse team of individuals, knowledge, skills, capabilities, backgrounds, to really create the board? And we're going to talk about the numbers here shortly, but it's not a laundry list of people. It should really be a close-knit group of leaders or individuals that can assist you. Third, when you do that leadership assessment, where do you have gaps? If you cannot be honest with yourself, if you have not taken your personal assessment, the 360 assessment, community assessment, friends assessment, and say, this is the thing that I consistently hear, or this is the place that I personally want to be stronger, you cannot begin to ask someone to advise, support, provide leadership in an area where you do not have clarity. So do you have a gap? Where do you need support? Is it coaching support? Is it developing writing skills, business skills? Is it presentations? Is it helping to understand how to network? Name that thing that you're really trying to work on, and then design your plan around it. And then finally, begin to go through your list of individuals or through your list of people. And even if you don't have someone directly, so let's just take, Allison and myself. So if you say, I really don't know a strong female executive leader or business leader, or, a partner, then begin to think about your external network and tap into the network. I'd be more than happy to provide names and information of phenomenal leaders, both male and female, of different backgrounds, that pride themselves on supporting and helping individuals grow. And then finally, after all of that, you figured it out. You know you need it, and you're ready to go, and you've built the plan. Are you really ready and able to make the changes? Because oftentimes we want to do things, or we want to grow, but we haven't made the decision. And I've been talking about level up, decide, commit, succeed. We haven't made the decision and committed to the transformation that needs to take place. So before, all of these things, it all starts with you, and you need to be prepared. So let's talk about what this ensemble really looks like when you're creating your board of directors, and how to identify them. So you went kind of through that checklist for yourself, and you said, okay, I'm ready to go. So one, I would say identify individuals, or select individuals who you regularly keep in touch with. It's going to be very difficult to identify someone that's on your board that you meet with at an infrequency where you cannot have this rapid, just-in-time, frequent dialogue. Again, you may establish some relationships that you may have to be more structured in how you connect with someone. But again, you most definitely want to have someone at your board where you have access to them at a frequency that can have impact to your goals and objectives. Secondly, when we think about that ensemble, and remember, I suggest that it's a small list. We have some recommendations here, and you can choose. Again, these are recommendations. Do you have a connector, someone that's influential in their circle, someone who has a network that could potentially connect you with others or with the right resources? Do you have an information powerhouse, someone who is in the industry, who has insights, who has the latest and greatest information to help you build your knowledge base? An influencer, someone you can say, hey, I'm trying to do this, but I don't know this, who can actually get in and open the door and create some inroads for you. Maybe that's what you need. A developer, someone that can design, build, execute, someone who is very process oriented, that understands the systematic steps and approaches and can not only coach you and support you, but develop you to strategically and tactically think the blocking and tackling of how to particularly do something. And then finally, the sponsor. A sponsor is just someone who's at a position that basically, and I call it co-signing, that will sponsor you, who will bring you along, let you pack the briefcase, invite you to things, suggest that you show up to really sponsor you in the presence of a particular audience. If you're in the community and you're trying to influence community efforts, you may need a community sponsor that can say, hey, I need you to show up at this event. We're going to give you 15 or 5 minutes to talk. So again, every individual is unique and every individual needs something to support their blueprint. But here's an example at a very high level of how you need to think about your plan and who do you really need it. If I think about the example that I really needed a connector, people that can connect and tell me what I was doing well and what I needed to improve, but also connect me and put me in scenarios where I can continuously practice that. Secondly, now that you kind of understand the construct and maybe some of the dynamics and what you need, I will tell you it's very critical to have a diverse panel and backgrounds. When I say diverse, you want to be inclusive, whether that's ethnicity, culturally, personalities, industry, leadership, insights, skills, because people think different. People are exposed to different things. People have different networks. They have different resources and tools. And so if you limit yourself to like-minded individuals, probably 8 times out of 10, you're going to get the same consistent answer. So you want to have some variation, which we're calling diverse or inclusive. And this is just a small list of some examples to make sure that your board is diverse. And then you also want to think about those that have been successful in their communication, in their leadership. It is nothing like going to get advice or having support or someone on your board who has not quite achieved the level of success that you are looking for. And we all measure success different. So if you're looking for someone for financial, to be a part of your board, but they're bouncing checks or they can't keep their own books, I'm not really sure how they're going to be able to help you unless she says, oh, I really don't need Tiki for this, but she's a connector. But remember, that relationship collateral, sometimes people supersede themselves, and you want to make sure if you are connected with someone that they have a reputation and brand that supports the image and brand that you are creating for yourself. So just as a recap, if you think about this, if you go to the next slide, Allison, and then we'll open it up for any questions. So number one, start with yourself. You need to create your own self-assessment, because when you reach out to someone like me, I'm going to say, okay, so tell me what you're thinking. Where are you? What do you need me to help you with? So we can be intentional, deliberate, in creating a plan for success. Make a list. Clearly define and document 2 to 3 areas that you want your board to support you with. Document and have clarity about where you're going, and then really start your selection process, whether it's be some of those characteristics that we talked about from the influencer or the connector, from that diversity and inclusion perspective, or just someone that may have a different industry background to begin to help you think about those things. So this is what I need. I'm going to work on these two to three things with the board. And now I've identified, 2 to 5 people or 2 to 3 people that can help me. And then most critical, it's kind of like ready, set, go. Set you a specific start date that you're going to start this journey. And I think we're going to talk about communications later and begin to start the path around stepping into the direction that you're moving to. So that's what I would say, and I have some examples in there, and I'll use one more, and then I'll open it up for questions, and or Allison, if you have feedback. So if you think about a specific coaching plan, when I've coached leaders, I've kind of said, hey, we're going to work on your executive presence. And let me tell you why your executive presence is critical, whether it's for your internal brand or your external brand with clients. These 3 people can help you. One from a female perspective, because women hear messages different. One from a diversity and inclusion perspective, because minorities, whether it's disabilities or vet or whatever, they have different needs in a message. And then one from a leadership execution perspective. So that way people who are successful in creating inroads in this area, you can begin to emulate, or they can give you some of the tips and tools. And so here's our plan. We're going to send an email. You're going to set up routine meetings, face-to-face meetings. I'm going to check in with you. We're all here to be accountability partners to help leaders be successful and grow. And so, Allison, those are some of the things that I believe are critical. I know there's some things that's not on the page, but at a very high level, those are the essentials that every leader should have in their toolkit. What about you? Any other thoughts or examples you have?
I think that I think what's really key here as a key takeaway is that we become very intentional with it. Oftentimes, if you don't have an intention set with it, when you approach someone to be a part of your leadership board, which we're going to talk about how to do that in just a moment, um, their time is precious, and just like your time is precious. And so the more clear that you are, so making sure that as an individual and as a professional, you do take the time, and this is a great time to do that right before this new year starts. Don't wait till December 31st to do this. Like, start now. And especially if you think you are ready, or maybe you think maybe I'm ready, and a couple of people come to mind, like, go ahead and start doing and really start diving into the tools and resources that have already been provided here in today's session on how to think about yourself first when it comes to this, and what you need and where you want to grow, and then start building this momentum with making a list and then starting the selection process. I think for time's sake, we'll just move on to the next topic, where we're going to talk about the impact in those 5 strategies in order to truly build a successful um, leadership board of directors, so that you can leverage it as a professional and where you need to go. So I think what we could do, Tiki, here is I'll take a few, and then you take a few, and then we'll get an opportunity to have anybody ask any additional questions at that
Sure.
point. Awesome. So the first, I think, is we've got to decide on a structure. And routine is really what makes those relationships thrive. A schedule helps with your accountability on both parts. So pick a meaningful meeting cycle, one that really, one for sure that will work with your schedule, but that also that kind of meets a rhythm that works for your lifestyle, and your leadership board participant with their lifestyle. That might mean speaking on the phone twice a year, or to meet for coffee once a month. And you want to make sure that you're present um, in their life during downtime. So, that friend who only calls when their life is capsizing, don't be that person. So every time that there's something that comes up in your career that is like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to deal with this, and that's the only time that you reach out to your leadership board, that's going to become very draining for them, because really, I think, a few times is fine, but they also want to see your successes, and they want to participate in the successes as well. You want to establish a normal cadence of that communication outside of your meeting cycle. For example, I want to wish you a happy birthday, or anytime that you see successes happening in their career or in their organization, or perhaps you know them personally, and maybe they have one of their kiddos is celebrating graduation, that you're building a true relationship with them. This isn't just about you getting something from them, that you're actually building a relationship with them as well. Um, and often the big question is, how do I even approach somebody? Do I tell them that they're on my leadership board? Like, what do I do? So here is, it can be pretty intimidating. It's very similar, like trying to go to a job interview. And the more advisor conversations you start to have, the more comfortable you'll become. um, Jenny Hogan, who's the CMO of Tagboard, says, I've had way more no's than I've had yeses. So embrace the no's and keep trying. And just get a warm start. Start with somebody that you already have a connection with, that you feel like would be awesome on your personal board of directors. It's always better to have the kind of that warm introduction. So try to have a mutual connection to introduce you if it's someone that you don't know as well, or maybe that you don't know at all. And if that's not possible, research where you two may overlap in life through LinkedIn and ask for an introduction. Tiki, tell us a little bit about how we can plan for those meetings to be successful and that connection can be meaningful.
Yes. So first, I would say, one, when you really have clarity around where you're trying to focus, I think you can have three parts to the meeting. And again, everybody has their own systematic approach. But one, starting out with the why. Why have you asked to connect with this person? Provide some context and the background. Number two, provide the what. What are you trying to accomplish? And most importantly, how you believe this person can help you accomplish that. And then finally, it's the how. Based upon what you're thinking, provide some specific ideas on how you can begin to capitalize on what you're doing. So I would say, Allison, thank you for meeting with me. I reached out to you because I'm really working on trying to develop my executive presence in the workplace. And specifically, I'm working on being able to relate and engage with senior leaders. How I'd like to do this is that I'm looking for some support, some coaching, some feedback around some specific instances or some ideas that I may have so that I can be successful. I may want to share feedback with you or observations, or if you're connected to someone that I know, for them to give you some feedback. And then what I'd like to do, if it works for you, I like to set up time every 2 weeks or after a particular presentation to touch base with you to kind of debrief what I think happened, share any feedback if it's been received or if you observed me, so that I can get that real-time coaching and support on a particular area. And so again, that's specifically around a situation. There could be many variations. So why you're reaching out, what's the role you want them to play, specifically what do you want to focus on, and how do you think that board member can really support you in your goals and objectives. I would also go back to, you know, keeping it meaningful and relevant. Also, too, as I mentioned earlier in my example, as things changed or as I became more proficient in a particular area, I may needed to sunset or end a relationship or discontinue someone on my board for a specific reason, and I would communicate them to them. So, I would just say this last point, in a relationship when it needs to be ended, and again, it can be very positive and rewarding, or things may change as a course as you progress, or just the everyday life takes place. So that's what I think, Allison.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Mhm.
think it's important even when you sunset that relationship as your personal board of directors, that you still stay connected with them, and be intentional about that as well. For me, for those that are currently on my leadership board of directors and those who have been in the past, I actually put a calendar reminder for myself because life happens. And when someone's not actively involved in our lives, it's easy for us to forget. And so I have intentionally, for me, placed on my calendar, for those that are no longer on my leadership board of directors, that I connect with them twice a year, whether that's by email or by picking up the phone or sending a text message. And of course, if I see something to celebrate with them, I do that in the moment as well. And I think it's important because what I have seen is as they progress in their career, that also has been very positively impacted in my own career, or perhaps they're connected with someone in which this has happened more times than I can count, where they have reached back out to me and said, I'd love to introduce you to Mr. or Mrs. So and so, and here's why, because we've stayed active and those relationships have been very beneficial as well. So as we start to wrap up, I think we could probably talk about this topic for a long time because I think it's such a critical and often overlooked piece of our development as professionals, as leaders, and as community connectors, to have this as part of our growth and development. So I'm going to just see if there's anyone that has any questions at this time before we kind of start to share and wrap up our conversation here. So, okay, well, it doesn't look like that there's any questions at this time.
Well, I do have a question.
Oh, yes.
Um, so I was thinking if I ever I do have a couple of people now who are I had never heard of the term personal board before, but as mentors, I do have a couple of people I reach out to on a regular basis. But as after listening to this conversation, I feel like the board can be really diverse, right? Like it can be people who are not in your field of profession. It can be somebody who's younger than you, or in terms of still a budding professional. It can be anybody who you seek to get some advice and guidance from. So when you have more than 2 or 3 people on your board, doesn't it get very confusing because you're hearing different perspectives from different people? So how do you know what to pick and choose?
That's a very good question. So I will start.
Yes.
So first of all, you have to remember, and this is any information, whether it's 360 peer, whatever, you have to look for the thematic elements and make sure that it's relevant. And so oftentimes, I've received feedback or recommendations or leadership, and I say, I need to think about that. And I need to, play that through my own track. And then I may go to someone else and get feedback. So I don't take feedback or recommendation one for one, especially when I'm working on something specific. But I do take all of it and say thematically, or is there something that each of them said consistently that resonated with me? Sometimes because of someone's characteristics or a background, someone may suggest something that's good for them, but it's not good for me because it's not a part of my personality. So I would say when you get that, listen, say, you know what, thank you for that. I need to think through how that would play out for me. Maybe even test that feedback or recommendation with someone else. And at the end of the day, you take all of that, as well as your gut, your intuition, your direction, and say, here's what I'm going to set out to do, because you have to come at it from a comfortable place. That's my thought. Alice, I don't know if you have something different that you would say.
I think that was brilliantly said.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say that also there are going to be times when your leadership board of directors may be 3 people, or at one time it might be 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things we've kind of talked about that Tiki shared too, of using your discernment too.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's advice is for you, but I think everyone's advice can be a learning tool. And sometimes it's a great resource too when you're mentoring people or when you're on a leadership board of someone else's, that piece of advice that maybe wasn't for you could be for someone else as well.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. So true. Good question.
That was awesome. Any other questions before we kind of recap our conversation today?
I don't have any other question. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for the question.
Yeah. So, as over the last 30 to 45 minutes, we have talked about, what is that leadership advisory board or personal board of directors? And we talked a lot about the purpose behind that, the why we need that as professionals to grow personally as well as professionally. We talked about who should be on this leadership advisory board. How do you identify them, and what are the characteristics of each of those individuals that should be on your board? And then finally, we talked about how to develop a strategy in order to not only identify who should be on your leadership board, but also how to engage in a relationship with them to, one, leverage their knowledge for your growth and development, but also how you can continue that partnership, whether they stay on or fall off of your leadership board. So I hope today you found that this was true for you, that it got you excited about having this as a part of your development and career path. This is something that is a lifelong journey and not just for this one moment in time in your career. Both Tiki and I have been in our careers for over 20 years, and this is something that we both continue to do, even at the level that, like for Tiki, has been at that very high senior level role, and now runs this incredible business with a team of people, and she still has that leadership board of directors. For me, as someone who has played different roles and many hats in multiple organizations and growing as an entrepreneur myself, it has been critical for me to have that available to me as well. So we want to make sure that we provide you an opportunity for your own additional development. And hopefully someone came to mind of, gosh, they should have been on this phone call. They should have been on this webinar. We want to make sure that you also walk away for resources for them as well. And so Tiki, share with us just a little bit here of the resources that are available. And then we're also going to talk about some additional things coming up that we'll be able to provide for you as leaders.
Yes, so thanks. So here is just some additional resources. One of the things I always like to do is balance out the perspectives and the diversity of thoughts and ideas. And so even from a coaching and development perspective, want to do that. So there's a couple of resources here. So one, Find Your Tribe. This is actually a network and personal advisory board. So I put this here so you could just go out and take a look to see if you want to see something in motion and some activities that are out there. So that's a resource. There's also 2 books that's out there. One, Circle, The Art of People, that talks about these simple skills and things that you may want and how to identify them, or creating a personal advisory board and how to leverage that. And then finally, we're here to help, helping you assess your full potential, to help you go through a strategic brainstorming session or identification session, helping you synthesize all of the feedback that you may have received to really help you build a blueprint, and even maybe co-author some recommendations with you about where you may want to start on your journey to develop. So these are just some external resources. And again, I wanted to leverage out some of our insights and perspectives that you heard here today.
Awesome.
Also, we want to give you an opportunity, if you go to the next slide, please. We want to continue to help you develop. And so Allison had mentioned earlier around leadership development and a program. So we actually have worked together to develop a program called Drive, which is a leadership development program that helps individuals at all career stages develop their leadership, their business skills, and just with overall development. And we're offering a 6-week accelerated course We normally charge about $500, but we're discounting for this group for $250. So what do you get? You get actual courses, masterclass courses. You actually get coaching embedded in that. The opportunity just to network and engage with other female leaders or individuals who are on their journey. So we're hoping that you'll consider Drive and participate. And then also as a part of joining today, I think it's the first 4 people that email us back or get in touch with you. We do want to offer you 1 hour of free coaching on whatever topic that you have to help you along your path. Allison, anything you wanted to add on the Drive program or just the coaching opportunity?
Other than traditionally, as Tiki and I built this program, it is traditionally a longer term program, but we're going to give you just that laser focused coaching that's available and resources that'll be available to you. And we're incredibly excited. These are programs that we've been discussing with global companies who have a high interest in bringing this to their managers, and the individuals on today's webinar or those that'll be watching the replay will actually get a first taste of really where this will be beneficial for you as a leader and as you build and create engagement in your own career. And that free hour of coaching, as Tiki said, will be on whatever you would like to focus on. And Tiki and I are experts at this, and you will walk away with clarity. You'll walk away with an action plan, and you will walk away feeling even more empowered than you first started on the phone call, which is priceless. So thank you so much, Tiki, for being here. As always, I'm so grateful for you and your presence and your wisdom. Thank you to Sapna, and for those of you that have been on the live webinar, and for those of you watching the replay, Tiki and I would love to hear back from you. Let us know what you loved about today's webinar. What are the additional questions that you have? And in the previous screen here is our contact information. So feel free to reach out to us, and we will have more of these live webinars in the months to come. We would love your feedback and any topic ideas that you would like to hear more on, more education and awareness, or additional encouragement in your growth, your development as a professional and as a person. Anything else you would like to add, Tiki, before we kind of wrap up here?
No, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone. And be on the lookout for both on LinkedIn. There is a private Facebook group called Career Clarity for Women Leaders on Facebook, in which we provide weekly information and resources just designed for women leaders. And then both Tiki and I have extended our time and our knowledge and network to you. So please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will connect with all of you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.